Animals are incredible. That's it. They're just incredible. And today I want to explore some of the spiritual depths of animals here in our lifetime. I want to talk today about how they come down, how their three bodies are structured a little bit differently than ours. I want to talk about how they act as anchoring points. I want to share a couple personal stories with you today as well that just highlight the magic of animals here and the highly intuitive nature. In a nutshell, today we're going to talk about animals being our spirit guides. I want to first give a shout out to one of the new Sage Circle members. So the Sage Circle community, it's an online spiritual community. It's incredible. It's full of just the most amazing, unconditional, loving, spiritual life path, amazing people, right? And the Sage Circle community has been open for a couple of years, and it's just grown to be this really empowering, high vibrational space. So when new members come in, I tend to want to have a meeting with them. I want to meet them, right? So we all gather in a meeting section, and I met one of the new members, and she said, I've been following your podcast. And I was like, thank you. Side note, if you're listening to this, please follow the podcast. It helps the channel. She says, I've been following your podcast and I'm curious about animals. And she asked a couple of questions and I was like, that's it. That's going to be an episode. I absolutely love that. So just a little quick shout out to her for this one, and a thank you for bringing this topic up, because what I typically do when I sit down to create a podcast episode like this is I work with my guide to say, okay, here's the topic that I have in mind, or I don't have one in mind. Please, tell me what you'd like me to talk about, or a circle member just mentioned this, let's talk about it. And then I sit down with my guide and I say, okay, what are the touch points that are going to be really helpful in this podcast? The whole goal of this podcast is to get you thinking. Really, first off, remind you that you're a spiritual being having a human experience, that you're highly intuitive, just as intuitive as anyone else on this planet, and that it is accessible for you. I love giving tools for people to be able to train their intuition, and also to really talk about these concepts so we can start to see the world in our own way, and not the way that we were necessarily programmed to, but see it in how we're linked in and how we're connected. So let's jump into animals today. So thank you. Thank you to the circle member for this. When I talked to my guide, I was like, okay, all this stuff is really coming out and I love this so much. So what I want to cover today when it comes to animals, and the whole theme is going to be how animals are spirit guides. They're spirit guides in physical form here on Earth. Most of the time, they're here to do a job, right? Sometimes they're just here for cuddle companions and happy buddies and, and just having a really, really love energy around you. But in general, animals are spirit guides that are here to watch over you, to help guide you, to center you. We're going to talk today about them being highly intuitive, which we already know, but I want to talk about the three bodies, because if you've been following me for some time, you've heard me talk about the three bodies. I'll give a very brief review, and then I'll talk about the three bodies and how it applies to animals, because it will help us see animals more in a spiritual light and understand why they function the way that they do. They're very job oriented. I want to talk about anchoring points with animals, so I'll get into that. And I want to also, share a couple of examples of moments that I've had with my own animal spirit guides that have really, really changed my life in big, big ways. Okay, let's jump in. Let's start with talking about how animals are highly intuitive and why that is. We know it. We know it. Anyone that has a fur baby, a feather baby, a scale baby, you know it. You know they're highly intuitive. They know long before you're going to come home. They know about your feelings and your emotions, all of this. But let's break it down into something to sort of a concept that we can grasp. And I'm going to start with the human experience and then compare it to the animal experience. Now, before I do this, side note, on the other side, before we ever come down here, we have a soul group. We always have a soul group, even when we're down here. But on the other side, we have a soul group, and it's the souls that are closest to us on what I call like the spiritual web, right? On the other side. And in every direction, you're connected in some way, shape, or form to another soul. The ones that are closest to you, those are part of your soul group. Animals exist in that web. And this concept is a little bit more intricate than just a general concept of animals on the other side, but here we go. I've been doing readings for a very long time, and I really want to express this before I talk about the three bodies. I've been doing readings for years and years and years, and quite frequently an animal will come through that was a pet. That's either a living pet, because they're so highly intuitive, it's easy to come into either a psychic or mediumship reading, or an animal that has passed and is reconnecting with their owner who I'm talking to. And not every time, I would say about 10% of the time over the years, and we're talking like a lot of readings with pets coming through, an animal has come through but has expressed themselves through human form, meaning that there are some souls that spend most of their lifetimes on planets, plural, because it's not just one, in sort of the human type form. And occasionally they'll spend some of their lifetimes in animal form. We can choose to come down as an animal. And at first, I mean, anybody that heard that wasn't good to animals would go, why would I want to do that to myself? And I look and I think, why would I want to come down here and be you? So we're all going to go in our own little corners with that one. But if you care for animals and you're compassionate about loving animals, you know that coming down here as an animal is an absolute gift and an incredible journey. So some people, some souls on the other side will come down quite frequently as humans, but sometimes come down as an animal. Some souls come down most of the time as animals, right? And there's a whole variety. So there's no limitation. There's no stamp on a soul on the other side that says human only. There's no stamp on a soul on the higher self of somebody on the other side that says animal only. We're not restricted to coming down here in one form or the other. So keep this in mind. Now, getting into the three bodies, right? To all the animal lovers, my apology. No hate to the non-animal lovers. Y'all just haven't figured it out yet. So it's okay. But when it comes to coming down here with the three bodies, if we come down in the human form, in essence, in the human form, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we've got three bodies. Everyone's got three bodies. When they come down to earth, you have to have them. Here's the review on the three bodies. First body, physical body. The second body is your programming body. It's your mind. It is you. Bo is me, Bo, on linear time. It's my happiness, my sadness, my tendencies, my humanness, the fact that I think I'm in this physical body, in this physical world, and I'm 51 years old. It's me in the matrix. It's me. It's programming body is your mind that says this is who I am in this lifetime. Okay. It's the programming body that gets overwhelmed with joy. It's the programming that gets overwhelmed with sadness. It's the programming body that reacts to your experience on linear time. The third body is the spiritual body. That's easy. It's your spirit, right? So you got the physical body on one side, you got which is the vehicle that you're in. You got the spiritual body, which is your spirit that came down from the other side. And then mushed up in the middle there, that second middle body is the programming body, which is your mind on linear time. Okay. Humans come down here and their programming body is very strong. The human programming body is strong with you, is probably what Yoda would say to us. So it is very strong. And most of our reality here on earth, especially if we're highly programmed as kids, or if we are not here to walk a very highly spiritual path, right? That programming body is very strong. It's very strong. It's why humans are more anxious than animals, because animals, the programming body is not very strong. Their spiritual body is the dominant body for them. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is when you come down here, if you choose to be human, the programming body is the dominant body to being a human. Right? If it wasn't, there would be peace and love on this entire earth, because if our spiritual bodies were dominant in the three bodies as we walked around here, we would love everyone unconditionally. But that's just not the case. We walk through this life programming body first, mind first, self-identity in this lifetime first. That is the dominant body of a human. The dominant body of an animal is the spiritual body. They still have the programming body. They are still on linear time with us when they come down here and incarnate into a physical form. They still have to hunt, and they still have to eat, and they still have to beg us for food at 1:59, even though food feeding isn't at 2 until 2. So they still have the programming body, which is the quirks, the tendencies. They can have anxiety. They can have all of these emotions, but it does not dominate them. That is not their nature. Their nature is their spiritual body. Human nature is the programming body, right? This is the difference between humans and animals. So our experience here is very different. So back to when I was lightly joking about non-animal lovers, I love you, no shade. But back when I was joking about that, people who are not, they see animals as this thing and not necessarily having feelings and emotions and whatnot, they would be mortified at the idea of coming down here as an animal. That would be seen as a punishment for them. Okay, cool. For those that do see animals for what they really are, which are highly spiritual beings, that's a different lifetime. That's not a punishment, right? So we're running around here trying to be highly intuitive, trying to tap into our intuition. We're like, I just want to be more intuitive. I want to be more calm. I want to be more peaceful. I want to be more centered. I want to be more in the moment. You just said you wanted to be more like an animal, like a pet, like a dog or a cat or a cow or a donkey or a lizard or anything, right? They are in the moment. They're aligned. And that is really their wiring while they're down here. Now, when it comes to sort of their purpose-driven reason for being here, they're very linked into Mother Earth, a whole lot more linked in than we are, right? So they are intuitively linked into the tendencies of Mother Earth as well, right? So if something's coming up, they know it. If all the animals on a beach run up the hill, get off the beach. The tsunami's coming, right? They don't have that super thick, dominant programming body to get in the way. And your friend says, the water's receding, I think a tsunami's coming. And then you go, nah, doesn't look like it. That's the programming body, right? Meanwhile, all the animals whose programming body is not the dominant body, whose spiritual body's more in charge, they're already at the top of the hill going, okay, well, we're listening to our intuition. And we're all down here going, I really want my intuition to work. So we've all had the tsunami moment where we were like, nah, and then the tsunami came. It's a great analogy, actually, right? But this is what I mean when I'm saying animals are highly intuitive. Again, for animal lovers, I'm not saying anything you don't know, right? For intuitives, I'm not saying anything you don't know either. But when we can start to understand that our connection with animals is deep and it's on a soul group level, things start to click. We start to understand why we have animals, and some people will call them familiars, right? An animal that comes in and you're so linked spiritually that it just clicks. Some of us call an animal that comes into our life our heart animal, right? I had a heart dog. And my heart dog, her name was Apple. And she made the biggest impact in my life, equal to large impacts that other people have made in my life. And some people will be like, that's just a dog. And I'd be like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, so here we go. They do come down more job oriented because now that I laid it out in the 3 bodies, that makes sense, right? If we come down here focused heavily on our spiritual body, that means that we're focused heavily on the many purposes that we have here, the many tasks that we want to do, the many experiences that we want to have. But when we're focused more heavily on that programming body, we're more focused on survival and getting through and just managing being a human. So animals come down here, they're very spiritually oriented. They know that we're going from A to B and they're going to help us get there. So they're very job oriented. And this is for good and for bad. They will take a bad and difficult path. I don't like that, but they will. And if you know me at all, you know me, I'm a little bit of a realist around, some of this spirituality concepts of, well, everything should be perfect. No, you're here. We're not supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to have an experience. So some animals will come down here and will go through a path that's difficult in order to assist the human that they then come into contact with. It is a very life-changing and healing internal thing for a person to rescue an animal from something horrid, right? The experience of that rescue can reignite a person with their internal compassion compass. A situation like that, most people, unless, they're in that small minority, most people rescuing an animal from a horrific situation will take that to heart, and then will bring that newly blossomed compassion that's kind of come through stronger now as a result of witnessing what the animal went through and getting that animal out of it. They'll take that compassion into the world. And that animal came down and said, okay, I'm going to be in this situation. And I know that when you come and rescue me, you're going to have an experience of rescuing that's going to ignite a compassion within you. This is one of the most selfless things that exists on this planet. And it equally breaks my heart and equally makes my heart jump for joy that there are beings on this planet that will go through that to have and allow humans to have that experience. Remember, we have to have the dark with the light, or there's no light. I mean, we have to have both here, right? And it's the experience going from one to the other, dark to light or light to dark, that creates this whole existence. And so animals help with that. Do I like that? No. I currently have the most adorable little one. She's a mutt. I'm not quite sure what she is. I thought I knew what she was when I adopted her. And then she got a haircut and I'm like, nope, I have no idea. So she's just a hodgepodge of just the lovely, cutest things ever. And when I rescued her, they actually shared with me the story of where she came from. She came from a hoarding house, and sadly the owner had passed and had been passed for at least a week, if not longer. And there was 6 dogs, and I don't remember how many cats were in the house. But so when we rescued her, she was just matted and fearful and massively hunger driven and in total survival mode, and double her weight. So her and the other dogs must have figured out how to get into the food, is what I can hope. But you take an animal out of that and then you watch them blossom, and it reminds you to care for yourself that way too, right? So I can say, oh, look, I did such a great thing, but it has nothing to do with what I did. It has everything to do with that little sweet soul of a dog came down here and said, I'm going to do this, and Bo's going to have an experience from it, and it's going to shift her in a positive way. So if we should be praising anything, it should be the dog, because the dog set up, came down here, was in this situation and was willing to be in this situation to get through this experience, right? Yes, it would be wonderful. And if someone's like, well, how can we just stop all animal cruelty in the world? I'm on board. Figure it out. Let me know. We'll push that button. It'll change. It'll be great. We'll have to find our compassion growth from somewhere else. And that works for me, because I don't ever want to see an animal hurt ever. But I also want to honor the value and the just amazing experience that animals will provide for us, even at their own detriment at times. So that's the tough conversation when it comes to, why is there animal cruelty and things like this? And there are people who don't see animals as living beings, and that's fine. Here's the thing. That's their life. That's their role. I can joke lightly about it, but they're looking at, people who are deeply compassionate about animals going, well, okay, that's fine. That's their role. To each his own. Animals will interact with us in a way that we've already predetermined anyway, if that makes sense. So they end up being guides on Earth. So we can pat ourselves on the back, which you should actually. If you've ever rescued an animal, please pat yourself on the back. You did a fantastic thing. But it's what you experience as a person through the act of assisting and or caring for an animal that gives you the human experience that the animal wanted you to have. Okay, let's sit with that one for a second. Let's talk about how they are also anchoring points. So we're going to sit with that for a second and bring this into anchoring points. So animals come down here with, in summary of what we just talked about, kind of a job mentality, task mentality, guide support system mentality. They are absolutely strong intuitive spiritual beings, which is why love pours out of them. It's why bad things can happen and they can turn around and still love, right? With, there are always exceptions for all of these situations, but we're talking in general for animals. Their highly intuitive abilities also allow them, because their spiritual body is the dominant body and not the programming body, right? Because their spiritual body is dominant, it allows them to very easily pick up on the emotions of other. They are extreme empaths. And it's why simple communication works with them more than complicated conversation. It's why when animal communicators work with animals, they're typically not hearing from animals the complexity of the political system of this country or something. It's more they're talking on very deep, loving, compassionate human form, basic needs, basic structures, which are actually more important if you really look at the big picture. They're highly intuitive. They know your mood. They know where you're at. They know what you're saying. They know what you're doing. And they are there to be a mirror for you. So let's talk about animals next as anchoring points. Animals as anchoring point. So what is an anchoring point? An anchoring point is someone or something or some cute little animal being that I just think every animal on the planet is the cutest thing I've ever seen in my life. But so I'm a huge animal lover. But let's consider one of the jobs of these animals, right? And this can also be a job of a living person that's come into your life as well. So as I explain the concept of an anchoring point, you might think of somebody that you know that's like, wow, they're my anchoring point too. An anchoring point is a being that is here in living form that brings you into the moment quickly, without choice. We can detach. We can get lost in the past. We can get lost in worrying about the future. We can get our mind spinning with clutter, because guess what? What body's dominant for us? Our programming body. And we can get away from this moment in time. An anchoring point is a being that brings you into the moment. And that's what animals do. So in a rescue situation, if you were to go rescue an animal, you're not standing in front of that animal going, tomorrow I really got to get coffee on my grocery list. Like, that's not where you're at. When you're with an animal and you're present, talk to anyone who owns horses, right? They probably wouldn't even say they owned a horse. They would probably just say they care for the horse that chose them, right? They get it on the deepest of levels. So, and owners of cats, dogs, birds, just all of them. Anyone that has really deeply connected with an animal, they know you can't get out of the moment when you're with an animal. It's why when a cat will come up and like rest on your chest or cuddle with you, and you pet them and they purr, they are regulating your emotions. They are calming your programming body. When you are upset about something and your dog comes up, and one of my dogs comes up and sits, and I know for those on the podcast, you're only listening to this, but she'll be sitting right next to my side and then be an inch or two away from my face, just staring at me like, pet me now, it'll be okay. Pet me now, it'll be okay. It's like, okay. So highly intuitive, they know exactly where you are emotionally, but also it's their job to be an anchoring point for you. And the fastest way to soothe your programming body, which again is your mind on linear time, is to get into the moment. The way to access your spiritual body and make that the dominant body, the soothing, calm, reminding yourself who you really are, is to get in the moment, because the spiritual body's in the moment. The programming body is not. So animals, some people in this world have this ability as well, But animals naturally come down as anchoring points. They will bring anybody and everybody into the moment, in that moment, over and over and over again. Here is the positive and the not so positive about animals being anchoring points. The positive is obvious. Thank you. I needed to get out of my head. I needed to get back to what was important. You're being present with me, allowing me to scratch your belly, or with my example of Millie, scratch her ears because she's only 2 inches from my face. That's the positive. They bring you in and go, hey, let's just take a breath here. And that's a wonderful thing. The not so positive is that an anchoring point will also make you see yourself clearly. Another reason why we get out of the moment is to distract ourselves from seeing our own behavior and seeing how we affect ourselves and how we affect others. And animals will bring us back into that in a heartbeat. Animals they will reflect what's happening, right? If we're being aggressive or mean, or if we're being disruptive of a system, an animal will react. We will visually see that reaction from the animal. And that is an invitation to look at ourselves, because we're the ones doing it. So it's not like you can look at a cat and be like, well, the cat's trying to manipulate me to become the CEO of the new company, right? That's not it. Animals have got their quirks and stuff, but if they're reacting to us, it's us. So that's another way that they're an anchor point, is to have a loving, gentle way of saying, take a breath and look at what's going on. This is why people say all the time, having a pet, having animals will make you a better version of yourself, because you will be brought into the moment more often than you ever were before. And they will even frustrate you. There are animal situations where they will frustrate you. Any animal owner that says that they've never, ever, ever been frustrated by an animal is in denial. We've all had moments where it's like, okay, seriously, if I let you go outside one more time, will you go to the bathroom this time, right? So there are also moments where an anchoring point will show up for you and push a little bit, right? And push, and you get pushed out of that moment and back in the moment, out of the moment and back into the moment. It'll cause frustration. So this is another way that they help us learn how to be more compassionate, more kind, more in the moment, more present, and deal with patience and things like this as well. So these are all overall gifts, best version of yourself. And the last thing I want to talk about today is how animals emotionally show up for us. And I want to do that and also how they guide us, because that's how we started this whole conversation. Animals are spirit guides. So I want to talk about how they emotionally show up for us, but I also want to share with you a couple of stories about my heart dog. And I think that they're great examples of how they're anchoring points, how they're highly intuitive, how they are there in kind of a job to show up. So let's talk about showing up. When it comes to having an animal in your life, or being able to interact with an animal in your life, many times they show up for us in ways that we don't even see happening unless you really sit with it and pay attention. And what I mean by this is they will be present with you in ways that most human beings can't even do, right? Because they are so spirit dominated and not mentally dominated, an animal will be present for you in unconditional love and be right there. They will see you. They will acknowledge you. It might feel like pet me, pet me, pet me, throw the ball, throw the ball, throw the ball, but they're there and they're present. And to you, they're showing up for you. And people will say there's a unique feeling when you come home and your pet greets you like you're the biggest thing in the entire world, and I just can't believe you're here, and I love you so much, right? And I know people say this about dogs more than cats, but I know a lot of cat owners who have really, really cool cats, and that they're linked in like that as well. So an animal will look at you with admiration and love in ways that most humans won't. And they don't expect anything from you. There's no tit for tat. There's no give me this and I'll give you that, right? They don't have that icky stuff. They can literally show up for you. They will drop everything they're doing and be present with you and love you. And many times it's happening, but we might not even recognize the impact it has on us. Let me start with this first example. When I got Apple was a Cocker Spaniel, and I got her when she was 6 years old from a puppy mill. There we go. I was trying to think of the word of it. I blocked it out of my head. I don't like them. From a puppy mill. Well, they just produce as many puppies as possible. This woman was like, she's not producing anymore, and if nobody comes and gets her, I'm going to kill her. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to come get her, and because I don't want to spend time in jail, I will not kill you, but it's a lucky day for you. Anyway, I wasn't a fan of this woman. But anyway, I adopted Apple. I digress. We're not talking about me and my animal righteousness right now. We're talking about what animals bring to us. I brought Apple home. I don't remember what she was named. We just named her Apple. And we bonded tightly. I didn't go anywhere without her. I skipped on activities in the summer just because I didn't want her in the car in the heat. She was always by my side everywhere. And I can see this more now than I could see it back then, but I started to lean on that and not feel alone. I was in a marriage where you feel very alone all the time, right? And she showed up, and I was going through a really difficult emotional time. I was dealing with depression. I was dealing with a couple of losses of just things in life, not necessarily people. And my grandma, eventually passed. Apple was with me through that as well. But I was very alone. Kids were really little, and kids, it's not a child's job to show up for a parent. That's just my belief, right? And so the emotional turmoil I was going through, I went through completely alone, but she was there. And that's what happens, just being present. And she always made sure she had to be right next to me, even on the annoying days where she would lick her nose over and over and over for an hour straight, right? But it didn't matter because I wasn't alone. And the further I get past that experience, the more I look back on it and go, wow, it was because of her that I wasn't alone, right? At that time, didn't really, I know this sounds kind of sad and sappy, my apologies, but I don't have any siblings. I didn't have really any friends or anything like that. I was in a very isolated spot in my life, but she was there. She was there. So she was with me for 6 years. She lived to be about 12 years old. And I'm pausing because it's hard to talk about her, right? Even years later, when you have an animal that links in that deep, it's hard to talk about. But I remember when she passed, we suspect she had a brain tumor. She was old enough where I was like, I'm not doing anything invasive. I had the most amazing vet on the planet, just the kindest man I've ever met. And we were struggling with this. She was showing signs of heading out, right? And I didn't know this as of yet. It was just starting. And it was it was right around the beginning of September. And I had been booked out for readings because I was doing readings at the time, and I'm usually booked out 3-4 months ahead. And all of a sudden I had 2 readings cancel, and they both, now mind you, this is like the very beginning of September. Both of them on the same day called me to cancel their readings on October 6th. And I remember thinking, that's weird. And I looked at October 6th and I canceled them both and went, well, there was only 2 readings that day and they both canceled. A couple days later, my husband at the time said, yeah, I had a job out of town scheduled for the first week of October, but it looks like that canceled, so I'm going to be home. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. And I started getting a little wigged out about this. Why did that one particular day open wide up? Right? And no future clients booked on the 6th between September 1st and October 6th. It was open for booking. And then I let it go. And as I went through September, Apple started to decline quickly. And I was talking to the vet. We were working through it, keeping her in the best place that we could. And I finally ended up having to contact him on a Saturday and said, it's coming up. I think this is the phone call I don't want to make. And he said, okay, well, she's comfortable. We're okay. Just spend the next 2 days with her and come on in Monday morning, which happened to be October 6th. And I was really blown away by that. I was like, I didn't know when her death date was going to be, yet the universe did, guides did. Everything opened up for me that I would have no worries on that day. I was supported. And I know that's a small thing, but it lined up so efficiently that I was a little bit blown away by it. Now, here's the last story I want to leave you with to show you the power and the LinkedIn connections that these animals have, whether they are here on Earth, and she was here, but her, myself, we were watched over to make sure I would have that day with her. It was a very sacred day and a sacred time. And even if they've passed. So Apple passed and we got on the road and we went on a road trip for like 4 months. And my youngest son at the time said, I would really like to have a dog that I'm close to, like you were with Apple. And he said, I would really like to have a dog like that. And I was like, that's wonderful. That's cool. I don't know if this is the time for us to have a dog. I was being very much a mom and we were like in the middle of a road trip. I was like, I don't think, but yes, but we will talk about this. And all of a sudden we were both sitting on a bed, and toward the other side of the bed where there was no one, the comforter kind of sunk in a little bit. And me and my son both turned and looked and was like, did you see that? Yeah, I think I saw that. And so I thought, and it just passed through my head. I think that's Apple. And I hadn't seen her because I'd been grieving her and I hadn't seen her. And so we let it go. We went back to, I think we were playing cards or something, sitting on top of the bed. And we let it go. And a couple days later, again, we're on a road trip. I was in the middle of Oklahoma and we all went to a Panera sandwich shop restaurant. For those that don't have Paneras. So we went to a sandwich shop, and for the listeners that are listening, and I went there to get internet, right? So I could check in on business and things like this. And because where we were staying, there wasn't internet at the time. I'm sitting there in the middle of this restaurant. We're all eating food and I'm online, and I see Apple come in to the room and stand next to my feet in spirit form as a medium. This is not that big of a deal. To me, it was, because I was like, oh, Apple, this is the first time I've seen you. And or maybe it was the second time I saw her, but that's not the point. The point is she showed up. I was really glad to see her. And then I could hear her clear as day say, look up the local shelter. And I was like, what? And she goes, look up the local shelter. And I followed the orders and I looked up the local shelter. It was a local shelter in Oklahoma. I mean, we're from New Hampshire and we were in Oklahoma. I had no clue where we were. Looked up the local shelter on my laptop, sitting in the sandwich shop. And I was like, okay, there's a shelter about 10 minutes away from here, 10, 15 minutes away. And it said that little button on the shelter that says available dogs. And I clicked on it. And the first dog that came up was named Apple. And I cried and said, hey, to my kid, I think we should go look at a dog. And we did. We went and looked at the dog, and her name was Apple. And I remember saying to the staff, why'd you name her Apple? And she goes, I don't know. It's a really weird name, isn't it? I mean, this was before Gwyneth Paltrow and all that, because naming, her kid Apple and stuff like that. So it was just a super odd name back then. And she goes, I don't know. It just hit me. I named her Apple. And fast forward, we adopted that dog and we renamed her Waffles. So this is my tribute to Waffles. Waffles and my son were very close. Absolutely beautiful heart connection relationship. So deeply grateful to this day that Waffles came into his life, because I know that she was helpful and she was supportive. She was emotionally supportive to him when he needed it as well. So I'm really, really grateful. But that is how LinkedIn animals are. They're linked in, whether they're living or whether they've crossed over to the other side. And if they're crossed on the Rainbow Bridge, that's just a wonderful way of saying that they're very soul connected when they were here. So they've got a nice special bridge to walk over and reconnect with us in our soul group when we go back home as well. But they're highly intuitive. These are all things to sit with moving forward from here, join me in identifying the animals that come in and out of our lives as actual spirit guides. Whether they're here or whether they're on the other side, they are actual spirit guides. And I will end with a shout out to all the animal communicators out there saying thank you for what you do. It's wonderful work. And for all of us, the next time you feel soothed in the presence of an animal, know that they are your anchor point. They've brought you back into the moment, and they're doing a really good job. So tell them that. Tell them they're doing a really good job, and love them for me. Thank you for this time together. And thank you again for the animal suggestion from our circle member. Be well. Tell someone you love them today, and give that animal a little bit of love too.